Hey everyone, John Newman here. Thank you for downloading this episode of Card Mensches. Myself and Danny Black of Hobby News Daily would like to remind you this is a live show every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. It can be found on most of our social medias. Danny's at sportsbalt and Hobby News Daily. I am Sports Card Nation Podcast. And it can be found on our YouTube channels. At Hobby News Daily, Sports Card Nation Podcast, at Sportsbalt, and at Card Mensches. So with that being said, we hope to see you very soon on a Friday night in our very active chat room. Now let's start the show.
I'm Danny Black.
And I'm John Newman.
Welcome to Card Mensches.
Experience, quality, consistency, and the quickest turnaround times in the grading industry? We are proud to partner with SGC Grading. Check them out at www.gosgc.com.
I'm Danny Black.
And I'm John Newman.
Welcome to Card Mensches. Hello, and welcome to episode 49 of Card Mensches, also known as welcome to episode 49 of Card Mensches, or I just duplicate everything. What's up, Ruben? Thank you for staying up late tonight. We have a special 10 p.m. Eastern edition. I'll admit I had some family obligations that I couldn't miss, but I was happy to make those and happy to be here tonight. What's going on, my friend?
If you were in the Italian mob, your name would be Danny two times.
I think it would be Danny Two Chins, but you know.
Yeah, we're doing some late night. I feel like we should be on NBC replacing like Jimmy Fallon or one of those guys. But no, hey, better late than never. We might have a little bit lighter crowd just because of the time. So, you know, you can catch us after the fact, as always, on audio. And no, I wish it was. I'm not even watching sports. I spent some time with my family tonight, Danny, because the next 2 days I'm going to be home very little with two card shows. So I had to check in tonight. Now, like you said, you had some family stuff. So here we are, though, episode 49, almost the big 5-0 episode.
We got to come up with something for the next one. If anybody has any ideas what we should do for 50, let us know.
Yeah. And, you know, and so today's, you know, again, this is one you came up with, but it's timely and relevant, right? Postseason legends, I like to say, right? You know, the collectability of them. And we're going to talk about some guys that definitely are collectible. And then we're going to talk about some other postseason legends, maybe not so much. You kind of, you know, I guess if this was music, they'd be the one-hit wonders, right? We know that song, we know that moment, but we're not really fans of the band. Like, we'll buy the single, but we won't buy the whole album, and that applies to the hobby today. And I'll let you expand on that. But that's how I kind of look at this topic.
Well, it's funny. I look at it definitely like you do. Like, there's certain players who their legend, their hobby love has been raised by their postseason play. There's other guys who, even though they've had a moment in the postseason, you know, David Freese, not to pick on him, but his cards.
What, do you see my list? Do you see my list here?
No, I just remembered his name after like 3 days. I was so excited. But his cards aren't worth, you know, anything. And I think a lot of that will be regional. You know, like in Baltimore, we'll remember Tito Landrum in the 83 playoffs. So I think a lot of those one hit are going to be there that I've probably never heard of or haven't thought about him forever. Although shout out to Ray Knight. And you know, so we'll see. Want to say hello to John?
Look at that. That's something new. They put the logo up there now on StreamYard. How about that?
I'm telling you, look how fancy it is.
Oh.
Mookie wants to know, Did he miss?
No, but I'm wearing my Syracuse. This is, I don't know if we can see it. It's a Syracuse Mets shirt I'm wearing. This is I live 2 miles from the stadium, NBT Bank Stadium, where the Syracuse Mets play. I'm a media member, so I get to go to all the games I want for free. And some of those Syracuse Mets are now on the postseason roster of the Big Boy Club, enjoying some postseason success. So that's very cool. Viento.
Remember early in the year when you were talking about Luis Angel Acuna, and now there he is.
Well, yeah, I like him. I got to see him obviously a lot here. Solid ball player, and they're loaded. They're loaded in the infield. Some guys are going to be exiting stage left. I think we're going to see. I don't want to make this the Mets show, but I think we're going to see Brett Beatty probably moved in the offseason, and probably Jeff McNeil will probably be on the outs, looking in amongst other guys, probably for some pitchers that they definitely need. So, yes, yeah. I tell you, he's become quite a spark plug player, and he had a good year here in Syracuse. And if you're Brett Beatty, the writing's kind of on the wall. You're seeing all these other guys kind of get called up, and you're not. And he didn't struggle when he got sent down. Like, he played fairly well. He had moments of struggle, but like if you look at his overall numbers, they were good. It's just I'm going
to defend him a little bit in that everybody takes a different path to how long it takes them to adjust to the.
Well, I like Brett Beatty. I just think it's not going to happen in with the Mets. I think he's going to go somewhere else. Where that is, I don't know where that winds up being, but I think he makes a big club in a different city, or with a different team. I mean, he could be a Yankee, but we'll see. But they're loaded. We got another guy who's hurt right now, Ronnie Mauricio, who I really like too.
Yep.
Jet Williams, like their farms. I tell you what, between the Orioles and the Mets, there's two heck of farms right there.
Absolutely. And I'm still not over the '69 World Series, so we'll next year we could be World Series favorites, Orioles and Mets. Who knows?
I'd sign up for that. Listen.
What's up, Orlando?
If the Mets are in the World Series, I'll sign up. I'll sign up for it. Listen, and everyone's heard me on this show, my other shows. I'm a pessimistic Mets fan. Like, I always think the worst. I always expect the worst.
That's just a Mets fan.
Yeah. Well, I always expect the worst and hope for the best. And I'm not gonna lie about it. I'm definitely not gonna say I told you so, because I didn't tell you so. I didn't think they were gonna get in the playoffs, and I sure as heck didn't think they were gonna do any kind of damage. And yet, here we are.
You guaranteed me they would choke at the end.
I would have almost bet my house on it. Not quite. But starting pitching stepped up, some timely hitting. You got probably the MVP. If it wasn't for Ohtani, you got the MVP in Francisco Lindor, who's, carried them in this series here, this past series with the Phillies, and that last game that was looking like we're going the full distance, and then one swing of the bat. Edwin Diaz made it interesting, as he always does at the end. I'm not a huge Edwards Diaz. Me and my son were watching the game, and I'm like, I almost wish they let Peterson just finish this thing out. And sure enough, he walks the first two guys, and I thought it was going to be right. So,
Ruben's comment made me remember to wish everybody a happy Yom Kippur, a happy New Year, good Yom Tov, all those things. Should you celebrate? If not, I wish you peace and happiness in the year upcoming from me. So just spread a little love and a little vibes, and time to remember we're all specks on this big planet here, and just to love one another and enjoy that we get to talk cards. That's my piece for the night. So let's talk about why the Mets are not going to win it.
They're pitching. I'm not. Listen, I'm not sold on their starting pitching. They've had guys step up, but how long can you do that, right? So we'll see. Listen, I didn't think they'd get this far, and here they are. So I'll watch each game that I can, and hope for the best, right? I hate to say it, but regardless of what happens now, they're sort of playing with house money, Danny. I don't think even the most optimistic of Mets fans, I don't think would had them going to the World Series, like realistically, and yet they're one series away now. So we'll see, right? You got to win 4 games now, not 2 or not 3. It goes to 4, and whoever they get, right, it's going to be it's going to be a tough out. I think but anything can happen at this
Can
point.
Orlando, who I do have the utmost respect for, but I'm going to disagree with this. I think that's only going to be good for New York. I would be bored. I'd rather see the Dodgers and the Yankees, nothing personal, than the Mets and the Yankees. I think that's the better World Series matchup.
Well, I want to see the Mets versus anyone. That's where I'm going.
Fair enough. John needs a Grimace costume.
Well, I just need
There
to
you
paint
go.
myself purple. I think I got the right figure. I just the complexion's got to be purple. So
I know, but you're an honorary Ruben. We appreciate you showing up every week. Loving Mookie, because did you see Mookie's comment? Yeah, the Grimace comment is hysterical. Cooter says anybody but the Dodgers. Interesting.
no, I'll go for that.
I figured you'd be anybody but the Braves, and once they were gone, you'd be happy.
Yeah, I don't. I root for the Mets. I don't so much root against other teams necessarily. There's obviously teams I like more than others. But with the Mets still alive, I just, at this point, beggars can't be choosers, as the saying goes. So we can't pick opponents anymore. It's just how it falls. So, I hope they get by the next opponent and they're in the World Series. I'll be pleasantly surprised. And, you get to the World Series, right? If you would have told me the Mets were making the World Series in 2024, obviously I would have signed up for that. It's 8 days a week. So
you would have asked me what I was on.
Yeah, I would ask anyone who mentioned that what they were doing, and probably I have some Narcan I could have administered so to bring them back down to reality. But here we are, right? Maybe I'll just keep using reverse psychology and say, hey, I don't see them winning, and they just keep proving me wrong.
Let's get into the topic for tonight.
Yeah.
John, Tug McGraw says you got to believe.
I do to not as much as Tug used to. I'll just say that. But when they won the first round against the Brewers, I think I went on my social medias and used that Tug McGraw, famous quote. And I'll continue to use it after they win. Though I think it's easier to brag after you win a series than before. Like, I know the Mets too well to claim victory before it actually happened. Like, they could get swept here. I don't predict that, but that could happen. So
you've said that I think every series all year when we've talked.
I'm gonna keep doing it because whatever it is, I'm taking credit for this. I'm wearing the same underwear from the Brewers series.
That was the April Brewers series, by the way.
Yeah. So I'm using a lot of cologne and body spray, but there you go.
All right. Our topic tonight is postseason heroes, legends, their collectability. What does the hobby think? And I'm going to start off the bat with, I think there's like 3 categories of guy. There's the ones whose careers were helped by it, helped by what they did in the postseason. And I think their legend might have been inflated a little bit. Maybe the hobby loves them a little bit. And I'm going to use as my example for that Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter,
on my list,
without a couple plays in the postseason, is looked at as an above-average shortstop, not a first ballot, 100% or whatever he got, the Hall of Famer. I think that's because of the success he had in the postseason. And I'll go back and I'll use my David Freese example of somebody that had success, but it was not enough to do anything to their collectability. But Jeter's, I think, has been much more collectible because of what he's done in the postseason.
I agree. He made my list. But here's the thing. I'm going to knock off a bunch of guys right here. You can say that about a lot of Yankees, right? I got a lot of Yankees that legends are bigger because of rings on their fingers. You could go from Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra, Whitey Ford, Jeter, Rivera, right? Just that postseason, probably forgetting somebody. But all those guys, because of all the rings, right? Their legends are bigger. Championship rings make legends bigger. Reggie Jackson, they
I
named the
agree with
month
you.
after him.
Well, I agree with you, but I'm going to push back a little bit because Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, Yogi Berra, those guys, their talent stood. They could have played for the Expos or the Marlins, and it wouldn't have mattered. They would
Some of
still
them,
be who
yeah,
they
you're
are.
right.
Jeter was not that level of player.
Yeah, and the postseason bumped him up. I agree. I think Yogi Berra too. I think Yogi Berra was a great catcher, but I think he's viewed even better than he actually is because he has like he couldn't put rings on one hand. He needed two hands to hold all the rings. And he had a good postseason career. He had a great regular season career. I think he's viewed higher than he actually is. You know what I mean? Like, and again, he's a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying he's not a Hall of Famer. I'm just saying he's revered even more because of all those rings and postseasons.
The strikeouts were such a big deal when he played about how much he struck out without having that kind of that postseason magic in his back pocket to remind people what he can do. I think the strikeouts would have been a bigger deal in his career. And now we don't talk about strikeouts at all. Don Larson, Mookie says, lived off his perfect game for 50 years. Yeah, no doubt about it. Don Larson, somebody whose perfect game in the World Series, I think, has elevated them in the hobby. I think, maybe not a lot. They're not one of the great Yankees of all time, but Larson definitely, I think, has been helped by the perfect game. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean he's not a Hall of Famer, but I think he's talked about on that 9 inning performance, right? And a comment from Ruben I want to get to because he's on my list, right? The 91 World Series. Jack Morris is a Hall of Famer, but it's a great point here by Ruben. Did that series get him in? And it's hard
That's
not to say.
question.
It's hard to say no. He pitched on 3 days rest in Game 7. Just for those that don't know, whether you like Jack Morris or you don't,
It was
he
ridiculous.
pitched on 3 days rest in Game 7. And not only pitched on 3 days rest in Game 7, went 10 innings in a 0-0 game before they eventually won 1-0 and pitched the whole game himself. And that's just like Paul Bunyan stuff, if you ask me. And yeah, I think I'll be honest with you. I think that definitely got him a few more votes to get through the doors of Cooperstown. And whether you think Jack Morris should or shouldn't be in, I don't care what side of the aisle you fall. That is one of the greatest all-time pitching performance in World Series. And I watched that game, and like he kept coming out every inning. And as a former high school pitcher, actually in '91, I had just kind of pitched my last year in high school, and this guy keeps coming out, and I'm like, how many innings are they going on 3 days rest? How many his arm is going to fall off? And, guys usually are not that effective on 3 days rest. And you get 5 or 6 innings if you're lucky. He went 10 of shutout ball, was striking out people, and literally said, I'm not giving up any runs. We just need one run. Get it soon, please. They got it in the 10th. They got it in the 10th inning. And probably one of the greatest that I seen live. I wasn't in the stadium, but watching. And just as a 19-year-old kid, high school pitcher, just was in awe of how, and he wasn't a young guy anymore at that point either.
No, he was a veteran.
I mean, he was on the back nine of his career, and same thing with Kirby Puckett in that series. That's an all-time series, right there with the Twins, and so. Yeah, it's crazy stuff, and there's a lot of guys on this list.
Real
again,
quick, Orlando.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here. Orlando agreed with you on the Yogi Berra that he's got 10 rings and he managed the pitchers. He himself, though, was not the best catcher or best player.
No, and we can put a few catchers ahead of him, right? And again, not that Berra's a slouch, but he's not. When we talk about best catchers of all time, he's not usually mentioned, right? So, but when we talk about the rings, that's what gets him in the conversation, right?
It's the Bill
And
Russell conversation.
yeah, and I get it. And and Jack Morris, I actually think he should be in the Hall, but there are some people that don't.
Would you say that if there wasn't for that World Series game?
Boy, that's a great question. It would be harder for me to say yes. Let me I know that's a kind of a cop-out answer, but I think that performance that late in his career on 3 days, I mean that's like Disney script stuff, dude.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Well, that's
like
why I'm
okay.
asking. That's our topic tonight.
Yeah, sure. That adds to the legend, right? That adds to the mystique
Yep.
that gets you in. I'm sure that got him, more votes. So, and there's a few guys,
Real quick, we want to clean up the Mets Hall of Fame here. Mookie says that Yogi Berra is a great Mets Hall of Famer. Ruben says so is Warren Spahn, Ricky Henderson, and Richie Ashburn. We're doing the all end of their career with the Mets. We might as well throw Willie Mays in there.
Oh yeah, Willie.
Yeah, great Mets Hall of Famer. Ruben does talk about Jack Morris and says 5 times he finished in the top 5 in Cy Young Award voting during his career.
Yeah, he was an excellent pitcher.
There's a
He was
Hall
definitely
of Very Good. He's in the small room of the Hall of Very Good.
And during his era, man, he was a big game pitcher. He, when that question that gets asked, you have to win one game of of whatever year you're in. Who do you want on the mound? His name was mentioned a lot when that question was asked, and that's probably one of the biggest compliments you can get when you're a pitcher, when your name's mentioned. Like, we need one game to win. Who do you want on the mound? And a lot of times that answer was Jack Morris.
Well, I'll throw back a couple guys on my list who I think their postseason reputation adds to their legend. And I know you're a fan of both these guys, Bob Gibson and Sandy Koufax. If they didn't,
can I give out some stats?
Please go for it.
So Koufax, he won 2 World Series MVPs, had a career ERA in the World Series of 0.95 with a 42% strikeout rate, meaning
that's ridiculous.
42% of the batters that got in the box during the World Series play went back to have a seat on the bench without putting the ball in play. Not quite 50%, but pretty darn close. 4.2 out of every 10 batters couldn't put a ball in.
That's more than one an inning.
And Gibson, let me find it, because he was 7-2 lifetime in the World Series, 1.89 ERA, 0.89 WHIP, and in 81 innings pitched, he had 92 Ks. He won 2 World Series MVPs himself, 1964 and 1967. And again, they were the answers to many of play, like who do you want on the mound during that era when you need one game to win a title. And Gibson and Koufax were the answer for that. And so that added to their legend, especially when you look at Koufax, whose career was shorter. He needed those kind of stats and just legendary performances to add to his resume. Let's talk about some pitching performances, and then I'll mention a couple guys and be quiet. Madison Bumgarner in 2014, pitched 52.2 innings in the postseason.
Did that hurt the rest of his career?
Yeah, and I think he got a paycheck, a nice paycheck for that. But yeah, I think that hurt his arm.
Yeah,
and he's not a Hall of Famer, but he went 4-1 with a 1.03 ERA. He made his name in 2014 with that postseason run, including the title. Another guy, or Hershiser, right? Not a Hall of Famer.
Great name.
Yep. 3 in the same year that he had the 59 consecutive scoreless inning streak. Now, this is the same year, 1988. If that wasn't good enough, he won the World Series, went 3-0 with a 1.06 ERA in the World Series. So it wasn't like he started letting runs up in the World Series. His ERA was 1.06 in 1988 postseason. So just probably 88 or Hershiser's 1988 season is probably one of the best pitching seasons ever. Now, he's not a Hall of Famer, but it's one of the legendary pitching seasons ever thrown out from the mound. by a
I think
player.
I
A
think
pitcher.
people confuse the fact that just because you're not in the Hall of Fame doesn't mean you weren't great in part of your career.
Yeah.
And you know, a Hall of Fame is an overall career, but guys have great years over and over where they play at a Hall of Fame level maybe for a year. It's just not their whole career. I want to throw out another name from that 88 series. I think Kirk Gibson will be signing
Yeah.
autographs for the rest of his life for that home run.
Yeah, and again, and I watched that live as it happened, in front of my TV set, right?
Yep.
And the call itself with Joe Buck, and the dude's hobbling up to the plate. He wasn't even supposed to play. You got one of the best relievers in the game at the time, and Dennis Eckersley, who was making everyone else look silly. It was such a mismatch on paper. Everyone in the stands thought so. People at home thought so. Dennis Eckersley thought so. Maybe in the back of even Kirk Gibson's mind, he thought so. I don't know. But we all remember what happened. And it was like The Natural. If you ever seen the movie The Natural, it had that feeling. The only thing missing was that ball hitting like a light stand in the outfield and all the sparks flying down. But just like that's a Disney movie, but it wasn't a Disney; it was real life. And
But who's Kirk Gibson without that moment?
yeah, he's not Kirk Gibson.
He's not
Yeah,
Kirk
he's
Gibson.
not. Yeah, he's not. That made Kirk Gibson.
Vin Scully's call was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's what we're talking
I
about. So
think
guys in the postseason that have kicked it up a notch.
And, we talked about Jack Morris. Did that performance get him in the Hall? How about Bill Mazeroski in 1960 with the Pirates and the walk-off?
That's a great
home run?
name because he was known as such a defensive player.
Yeah, a lot of people don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but he beat the Yankees with that walk-off and made himself a postseason legend. Whenever there's a big postseason home run, his name tends to get mentioned again. If that wasn't the case, he's not going to be mentioned that much anymore.
Well, by the same thing, would anybody ever know Bobby Thompson's name?
Bobby Thompson.
If he doesn't go off of Ralph Brackett,
Yeah.
And
the Giants win the pennant. The Giants win. That's the other thing. We know calls from some of these moments too.
This is a great one.
Orlando. Carter.
Would Joe Carter be Joe Carter? No.
I will say this though.
He had a great
1993. It was a great moment. He's still a very, 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 very good player, even without that moment.
But how often would you ever talk about Joe Carter if it wasn't for that moment?
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's, a guy, that's another guy. When we talk about postseason home runs, right? That's probably maybe number one on the list with Kirk Gibson and Mazeroski, right? Bobby Thompson, which wasn't a World Series. Those.
Wasn't it the playing game?
Yeah, to get to it.
Yeah.
But it was, some of these others like Mazeroski, Carter, Gibson, those were World Series.
I just wanted to add a point on Gibson here. Mookie says that he homered in the 84 series too. Kirk Gibson was an amazing athlete. He played football at Michigan State.
Yeah, he could have played in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing who he was as a player. I'm just saying that moment in the 88 World Series took his career and made it memorable for a lifetime, not just, for a couple of years. This is another good one. Remember Ozzie Smith?
Yeah.
The last person you'd ever think would hit a home run?
Yeah, choked up on the bat, and that ball just kept going,
Just
and he's running around the bases. He's not even expecting a home run. He thinks that thing's off the wall. So he's chugging.
He didn't have a home run trot. He had never,
Yeah. He was chugging, thinking, like, I'm going to get as much out of this ball off the wall as I can. And the thing just kept going. Didn't make it by much, right? Yeah, there's a blast from the past, right? Let's even go back further. Obviously, none of us watching were around to see it. But, Christy Mathewson had 11 complete games in the World Series and an 0.97 career World Series ERA, right? And just amazing stat. We don't, in today's day and age, we don't even see complete games anymore. He threw he threw 11. And that's just I know sometimes we don't give enough love to that era, so I wanted to throw him on the list. Eddie Collins from the White Sox, who was one of the guys not named during the Black Sox scandal. He was in 6 World Series and had a career 400 average in World Series play, including 1919 when he wasn't part of that scandal. So, legend of the fall, right?
That way to go back in the Wayback Machine.
Well, sometimes I think I don't want to say forget, maybe a little bit of forgetting, but I don't think we give enough love to that era of ball. So
Orlando brings up the flip side here, John. What happens when a guy who has a good career has a bad moment in the playoffs?
Yeah, Bill Buckner's, Orlando points out probably the poster boy for that, right? And
you forget his whole career. He had a very good career.
He was in that. Like, there's people. I'm not one of them, but there are some people who believe he had like a Hall of Fame worthy, or he's in the discussion. I won't go that far, but yeah, that's it's unfortunate. I mean, for the Mets, as a Mets fan, it got me off my couch at 14 years old and running around the living room like a 14-year-old idiot. But even in my 14-year-old mind, after like celebrating, and then they've seen what eventually happened, even at 14, I knew like for Buckner, like that's going to be tough. Like, how do you go, back to the home fan? They're going to want to kill you or burn you, stick needles in you, make a voodoo doll. Like, I felt bad for him. I felt bad for him. Yeah. I felt bad for him because I knew the wrath he would face from one play, from one miscue, right?
And this is the point people always forget.
Yep.
The wild pitch before the hit can move.
Yeah. And stuff had to happen after that too. The Mets had to get that wasn't the end of the game. It wasn't like Buckner made the error and he walked into the dugout, as that was the game ender. It kept the inning alive. I get it, but more stuff had to happen, which as a Mets fan, thankfully it did. And even like I said, even at 14, I knew the gravity of the situation. As I was a player at 14. I was a baseball player. I knew who made errors and felt terrible. I'm like, he made it in the biggest stage with all the lights and everyone watching, and that's got to be tough. I mean, like, how do you recover from that? He did. I mean, he made amends with Boston at the end. That was nice, but there was many years he was a pariah. He was the Steve Bartman for the Red Sox.
John, I'm going to
the Cubs.
I'm going to update here. 1 out away from the Dodgers clinching.
Yeah,
just clinched.
The Padres got shut out the last 2 games. That's a tough way to. They had a lot of momentum.
Real time. I'm going to hit you real time with this. Does Shohei Ohtani actually have more growth in his hobby love if he does something in October?
I think the 50-50 season is making this already epic. Like, even if the Mets beat the Dodgers here in the NL CS, I think Ohtani's still looked at. Now, if Ohtani and the Dodgers win a World Series, that just adds to the lore. Maybe he's a Hall of Famer to this season if that happens.
That's what I'm saying. I mean that's another layer he doesn't have yet. And he's going to be 3 out of 4 MVP. And on any given day, he could be the best pitcher in the majors. You take those things, but there's no October success. And that just blows me away that there could still be more growth on him.
Yeah, he's young. I mean, he's not old.
No.
I mean, he just signed a double-digit year deal with the Dodgers. This is the first year of that deal. Now, is he going to be the same player in year 10 of that contract? I don't see it. But they're going to get a lot of good years, barring injury. And he hasn't even, like you said, he hasn't even pitched yet for the Dodgers. And there's some people, Danny, that say, you know what? Don't pitch. Just hit. You're already a legend with just a bat in your hand. Like, don't even worry about pitching. Don't risk it. But I think pitching and I think that adds to the lore.
Well, it's so hard to find good pitching. The Dodgers, like every other team, scramble for it. And if you can put a guy on the mound who's a Cy Young caliber pitcher and not have it affect what he does at the plate, I mean, how do you turn that down?
Yeah. And Mookie, I love Francisco Lindor, but a 50-50 season, your first year after a big contract, lots of pressure in a bigger market with the Dodgers over the Angels. Listen, I said, me and my son had this discussion. Any other year, Lindor easily, but on a 50-50 Ohtani year, first year in LA, I think he's going to win it unanimously and deservedly so. It's not like he's getting, it's not like Lindor's getting robbed. That's a huge year. So,
and to the point of our conversation, yeah, it will make a difference.
Yeah, and Mookie's last comment here, it makes a great point, right? The award. We always have this debate with awards, right? Can you win a Cy Young if your team doesn't make the postseason? Can you win the MVP if you're on a last place team? It's the most valuable player, and I don't think any Met fan, Mookie, myself, whoever else, will argue that Lindor was, if there was a Mets award for most valuable player, he'd win the Mets award this year, right? I just think a 50-50 year, which has never happened in all the years of Major League Baseball existing, it's never been done.
He really did carry that team.
In spite of Dave Roberts, who to me is one of the worst managers in the league. He's a manager that gets the least out of the most, so.
So wait, so Dave Roberts is known for a stolen base in the World Series, right?
Yeah, he's another. Yeah, I think he's overrated as a manager.
Do you think
you and everyone in the chat room could manage that lineup to a postseason berth?
Do you think his resume looks better because of that stolen base? Do you think people look at his
playing resume?
His overall resume. When people talk about Dave Roberts, does that stolen base make a difference?
I don't think so. I
think it does. I think people will always know him for that.
Yeah, I know him as someone who gets the least. Like, they lose games, and I question some of the games I watch. Some of his decision making is questionable. That lineup is loaded, dude. You got Betts, Freddie Freeman, Ohtani. Teoscar Hernandez is very good. Like, that team should have had a better year, than they did. Like, if they had what I would perceive as a better manager, they would have been even better.
They're heavy at the top, but they're not deep. Robert's stolen base was the League Championship Series. Mookie, we're talking about the postseason, not just the World Series.
Yeah. World Series, though, gets you a few extra for sure.
Yes, but thank you for correcting me, all kidding aside. So who else?
David Ortiz is not David Ortiz without the Red Sox postseason.
Agree 1,000%. I think he's overrated in general.
Yeah, I don't even know if he's really a Hall of Famer, but I think his postseason got him in. We talk about, postseasons getting the guy in the Hall of Fame. I think David Ortiz, and now he's doing post-game analysis on TV. I think a lot of that's from his postseason legend. To be quiet, I'm not saying he's a bad player. I think he gets, like you said, I think he gets more credit than he's probably deserves because of that.
Let me ask you a question: who's a better player, Jim Thome or David Ortiz?
In my mind, it's Thome's the more consistent player.
Right. I think most people would say Ortiz because of the legend of the postseason stuff.
Yeah, that's my point. So he made my list. Schilling, Smoltz. How about Kung Fu Panda? Right.
I'm going to disagree on Smoltz. I think Smoltz had a long.
No, he's a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying that, but he became famous for postseason as both a starter and a closer. And then you got, how about Pablo Sandoval from 2012? 3 home runs in one game. Right?
He had a hobby blip for a year
because of that series.
Yeah, it came back down to earth when he did. But
I was a dealer. I was a dealer since 1987. I remember selling Pablo Sandoval cards and almost feeling guilty. Like, this guy is not going to be long term. Like I almost wanted to tell people, you sure you want to buy these Pablo Sandoval's? You know what I mean? Like, probably not a good idea long term. You're just kind of catching the wave. But, when you think of Pablo Sandoval, you think of, his body shape in that 2012 World Series, right? And 3 home runs in one game, right? You mentioned them already. David Freese, big game player with 1 strike away from losing, right? Him and Albert Pujols in that series single-handedly won that for St. Louis. And, kudos to David Freese. They wanted to put him in there, the Cardinals Hall of Fame, and he politely and respectfully declined. He just said he didn't have enough of a great career. He had a great series, but he didn't think he was worthy of the Cardinals Hall of Fame, and he declined it. So
that's pretty silly.
Well,
I'll go in, and I didn't play. Ruben says Madison Bumgarner definitely got his shine in the hobby due to the postseason. Yep.
And just was pitching again 52 innings that postseason, right? After pitching 217, he pitched 217 in the regular season. So that's almost 300 innings for Baumgartner in that year. So, that's just crazy. Got a big contract and lived happily ever after. Never really lived up to the contract, in my opinion. But you got your Rick Dempsey.
That was the next one on my list.
Yeah. Not World Series so much, but Edgar Martinez in 1995 postseason, overshadowed even his own teammate in Ken Griffey Jr. And and he made the Hall. Was it that 95 postseason performance that maybe got him some? He wasn't a unanimous. He didn't get in unanimously. So did that 95 postseason add to Edgar's legacy, especially being a DH, right? We talk about our DH is worthy of getting in just because they don't play the field. Well, Edgar Martinez, although he did play some third base early in his career, but that 95 postseason, I should say, was like that made him Edgar Martinez. And,
I think there's
probably
no
in the
doubt
Hall.
about it. Yeah. Because a lot of people look at Griffey on that team, but Edgar is really the one that carried them, especially from the right side all year.
Yep. And, this goes to other sports. I know we're talking about baseball, right? Tom Brady, right, with all the rings. I thought, I'll say this, people might think I'm nuts. Peyton Manning was a better quarterback, like physically.
I see what you're
Brady,
getting at.
Yeah, Brady had better coaching staff and was smart, maybe a little bit smarter in certain situations. But, I don't believe Tom Brady was a better quarterback than Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning has 2 rings too. Brady has 7, and that's the difference. I'll use my own guy as a Steeler fan. I'm not even that much of a Terry Bradshaw fan. But he's got all the rings that got him a lot of notoriety to this day.
It's the only thing he has is the Super Bowls. His numbers suck.
Yeah, I was shocked, and I was a young kid watching him play, and not as much into the numbers and stats as hey they were winning. But when I really looked at his body of work, it was shocking. Joe Namath threw more interceptions than touchdowns, and they call him Broadway Joe. He's a legend, right? Because he played in New York, guaranteeing a Super Bowl victory as an underdog, and then delivering it, right?
Against the Colts, by the way.
Yeah. That one Super Bowl made Joe Namath. And so when you think of Joe Namath, you think of 2 things, right? You think of that Super Bowl, and then you think later on in his post-career. Yeah. So and people buy Joe Namath cards because of those. I hate to say it, those 2 moments a lot of times. So we talk about the hobby effect, right? Patrick Mahomes is going to be that guy who has a lot of years. So
yeah, being a league MVP 1 year, I don't think turns your career around, but.
Yeah, so I mean, it applies to other sports too, right?
Absolutely.
Again, going back to the David Tyree helmet catch from Eli Manning. I have to mention him because he's from Syracuse
Wait,
University.
let me take a step back. How about Eli Manning? If he doesn't win those Super Bowls, both of them, I think you look at him as a much more mediocre quarterback.
Yeah, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame with his brother. So,
I don't think
Dan
he deserves
Marino.
it.
Dan Marino was probably the best quarterback without a Super Bowl ring. He made it to the Super Bowl in his rookie year.
Yep.
Lost to the Redskins. Never made it back, which is crazy. Listen, he
And
had some
laces out.
receivers, but he
Laces
never
out.
had, huh?
Laces out. Laces
Yeah.
out. Ace Ventura.
He never had like the elite receivers. Like Clayton and Duper were good,
yeah.
but they were no Jerry Rice, right?
Well, he had no
And
running game or defense.
Yeah. And Montana's a legend. A lot of more because of the rings himself. So postseason can make the legend bigger. I'm not saying it's the only thing. You can be a Hall of Famer without a ring, as Marino is, but it can make and listen, even David Freese. We talked about David Freese that one year he just caught lightning in the bottle. Again, doing shows back then, I sold a lot of David Freese rookies, right? Thinking to myself, like people realizing like this, he had a great World Series, but long term, he's not a Hall of, So Big Ben, Big Ben's a better quarterback than Terry Bradshaw. Like, even though he has 3 less rings,
Unfortunately, I agree with that. Yeah.
So this is not just relegated to baseball. This crosses all the sports. We just focusing heavily, obviously, on baseball.
Well, it's baseball playoff time, also.
Yeah.
So there was 2 less rings. Yeah. Ben had
that's
2.
what rings get you, right? They get you more street cred, as they say.
What was I just going to say? But I think baseball is more reactionary. Football favors quarterbacks so much.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to move the needle if you're not a quarterback. Quarterbacks can go to the moon. People overreact so much.
Yeah, I agree. I think receivers are probably next, and running backs have become sort of an afterthought. It's just running backs have become, I think, when we look at the NFL, not to make this an NFL show, well, we're seeing running backs are not getting taken early no more, and it's just going to be, a 2 or 3 man rotate. Running backs are almost like a pitching rotation now. You're going to see just 2 or 3 guys come in for series and carry the ball and fresh legs. And when you do that, when you use a 2 to 3 running backs system, no one stands out, right? It's just the running game. It becomes the running game rather than a player. Their running game was successful, not, Kenneth Walker or Derrick Henry had a big game. And I think you're seeing,
except in Baltimore, where everybody can.
Yeah, no, and there's a few guys that are still the guys, right? CMC, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor with the Colts. Kenneth Walker still in Seattle. But I think a lot of these other teams, they use just a 2 or 3 man rotation, and I think that's the way the NFL's going. If I'm a kid that loves football, it used to be years ago, be like, I want to be the running back. Give me the ball. I want to carry it 30 times a game, right? Now kids are probably not going to want to play running back anymore. It's going to be just, all quarterback receiver or make their bones on the defensive side of the ball. But running backs is went from a sexy position to like no one's going to want to do it. Especially if you want to shine in the spotlight, you're going to be sharing it with a whole room of running backs, or 3 or 4 of them. So
speaking of sexy, I remember what I wanted to say. Lamar Jackson, I think, is one of the guys who is suffering from not winning a title.
Yeah, he is, and my son.
But I think there's guys like that in baseball also.
Yeah, my son, who's a big Steeler fan like myself, will tell you, like Lamar Jackson might be the best quarterback in the NFL, but like you just said, Danny, that postseason, lack of hardware is hurting him, and probably not fairly so. It's not like he's having terrible games. Yeah, like they're not winning, but I don't think he's like choking like we see other players kind of do. just whatever reason they run into somebody and that gets them. And barring injury, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. But sort of like Marino, right? That lack of postseason success. Maybe that'll be the conversation. Like the best quarterback never to win a Super Bowl ring: Lamar Jackson, Dan Marino.
All right, real quick before we get out of here, this is a great name from the past. You want to read this one?
Yeah, David Eckstein. He made he got a little Mensch love in there for David Eckstein too. Yeah, I forgot. I'm not gonna lie, I forgot about him.
I forgot about him.
I remember now. With Ruben mentioning him, I remember that. But when I was putting my list together, I missed him.
Joe Flacco is elite, by the way.
He sold his soul. How he's playing at the level he is at his age is insane.
Because he doesn't care. He just stands in there, and he's got an arm from the gods, and just stand there, take the hits, and throw.
Yeah, I was shocked. He did it last year too at Cleveland.
He won a Super Bowl for the Ravens in 1973. That's how long he's been playing.
How crazy is it? Think about the Browns, right? They back up the Brinks truck and trade. They mortgage their future for Deshaun Watson,
which might be the dumbest move ever, and I am including the Herschel Walker trade.
Yeah, and they get rid of Baker Mayfield, who's having a second coming in Tampa Bay. They had Joe Flacco filled in for an injured Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson admirably won them games, got him into the postseason. Then they part ways with Flacco. He goes to Indianapolis and wins games there, and you got Watson, who looks like a shell of him former self. Like Baker Mayfield and Joe Flacco are better quarterbacks than Deshaun Watson, and they're locked into a long-term, big money deal that they really can't get out of. And no one's going to touch Deshaun Watson with a 10-foot pole right now.
And that's literal and figurative.
Yeah. And like, what do you do? Like you almost got to cut him and eat the contract, and that's going to suck. But what do you do?
They can't. It's too much on the books. They screwed the pooch for all the other teams that had to overpay quarterbacks after that. They reset the market.
Yeah, it's. I agree. I think when all is said and done, it's going to be the worst looked at as maybe not even in football history, just in sports history. It might be a sports history worst trade ever.
Yeah, you usually don't go out and make somebody the highest paid player ever right in the middle of a.
That's the thing. They had reports like there was stuff was ongoing. It's not like the Browns didn't know anything about it.
Right.
They just rolled the dice and hoped it would blow over, or it was all being blown out of proportion. And I think it's all allegedly, so to speak. But
no, he settled 44 of the cases.
Yeah. So So, and what do you do?
Her owner Jimmy Haslam is an idiot. I mean, I
will say this: I'm glad they're in our division, as a Ravens fan.
Yes, you and I each get another bye on the schedule.
Yeah. Although the Steelers have a knack for playing down to their level and gacking one of those games. Well, at least one of those games seems like every year away. So,
all right, I want to give one more name on our original topic before we get out of here. Okay, because I think this is. I already put that up there. That was funny.
Well, I didn't, so I'm doing it.
Well, Mookie, who among us hasn't settled 44 cases?
A beer, maybe a beer.
Ruben, you're banned. You're banned, Ruben. Carl Yastrzemski, what he did to lead the Red Sox, what was it, 67? Down the
67. 67 was his triple crown.
Was that the year that he destroyed September?
I can't remember.
I know. I should. But
now I may be the wrong guy to ask because I was a New York City kid who loved Carl Yastrzemski. Some people may not realize that he's a Long Island legend who wound up being drafted by the Red Sox, and so Yankee fans had a hard time rooting against him because he was kind of he's one of us, so to speak, from New York. I
just want to throw it out there that if somebody carries a team down the stretch and gets them into the playoffs, a lot of times that can have the same effect. When
Yeah.
a guy puts a team on the back, a pitcher or hitter, and turns the season around. I mean, similar to what Terry Skubal did with Detroit. I mean, he's the only name on that team.
Dude, we saw that Detroit Cleveland game when we went to the National, right? And what did I say to you, man? This Detroit team is like I'm watching a minor league team. It's just at the major. Like, if you would have told me then that this team is going to be where they are, at this, like, I'd have thought you're nuts. Like, no way. Like, what did did 10 team planes crash? And they were like, I would have lost everything on that bet. Like, that lineup was 7 minor leaguers, a washed up Javi Baez, and one guy that could hit a little bit. And obviously one of the best pitchers in baseball, but he didn't pitch that night. But that team had no business even sniffing postseason, and yet here we are in 2024. Like, that one's shocker. That one, whether you like him or not, I guess you got to take our hats off to AJ Hinch. I talk about Dave Roberts getting the least out of the most. AJ Hinch is sort of the opposite. He gets the most out of the least amount of talent. So.
Yep. And Hershiser did the same thing down the stretch with the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah. That year was arguably one of the best ever by a pitcher.
Yep.
It was 88 Hertz. Like, just almost unhittable. Like, it was like you didn't have to be a Dodger fan. Like, when you knew he was pitching that night, you wanted to watch.
Absolutely. All right, we're into overtime, my friend. Anybody else on your list?
No, I covered them all, and again, I think you have teams that have like an eras of like high postseason success, like the Yankees, like the Red Sox later in the 2000s, and I think that builds legends up. The Ortizes, the Jeters, obviously the Yankee teams of the past. I'm not saying those guys aren't Hall of Famers, but that postseason just ramps their resume even up further, and it helps, and in certain guys' cases, like we talked, right? Jack Morris, Edgar Martinez, they have performances where, hey, that might have got them in the Hall, or you can look at that and say they're in the Hall because of that. Puckett even in '91 was tremendous, and so yeah, I mean, it's real. It's real, and I don't think the players don't have to apologize for it. They're just doing what they're supposed to try to be doing. So,
and yes, you can see Orlando tomorrow morning on Hobby Hotline on Bench Clear Media at 11 a.m. Eastern.
I will be in the metropolis of Fulton, New York, a very small city, at a card show. It's their first, to my knowledge, it's the first card show in this town. I'm not expecting anything too crazy, but I might have time to sit there and watch the Hobby Hotline from my table. I hope that's not the case.
I was about to say, I hope it does a little bit better than that.
Yeah, I'm going in with low expectations, and maybe David Freese will show up, and I'll have a.
That's what my wife said at our wedding. All right. On that note, say goodnight, John.
Good night, John.